is an in depth exploration of mental health topics, unpacking them one layer at a time. I'm your host, Jenny Peterson, and today we have on a guest, Dr. Lockhart, and we're discussing corporatization of mental health. So, Dr. Lockhart, would you like to introduce yourself and just kind of let the audience know what you're about and who you are?
Certainly. So my name is Dr. Ezra Lockhart. I'm an associate professor of marriage and family therapy at National University's JFK School of Psychology and Social Sciences. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a licensed addiction counselor. I operate in several states. Let's see, my uh, clinical orientation is strategic family therapy, as well as social culturally attuned therapy. I work with indigenous populations and with gender nonconforming, gender diverse clients and their families.
Yeah, so you're really well rounded, and there's a lot of acronyms behind your name.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, what do you kind of want to talk about today? Our goal is really to talk about the corporatization of mental health, which is a really big topic, and I do feel like a lot of the times it doesn't get discussed about between our circles and between therapists, and so yeah.
Yeah. So the last, gosh, it's probably 8 years, was 2018 that I started doing clinical supervision.
Mm,
So I was working with um, early career clinicians and those that were permitted doing their 2 year post grad in order to get their full license. And I saw how folks would get chewed up and spit out, especially with community mental health.
oh,
Um,
absolutely, yeah. Hmm.
oh yes. Um, and then as a university professor, which I do clinical groups, so I'm helping those in their grad program um, with their internship placements and receiving supervision as they work with clients.
Yeah.
And I was able to bridge the themes that's kind of through line in which we're not really prepared for what practice looks like. There was a time and the aim of mental health education was that you were going to go through school and then you were going to move into some type of independent practice where you were calling the shots and you were really um, like operating off of your own ethical base and your own values. But that's since changed where universities are pumping out um, like corporate workers, right? Right into the work field, workforce, and not preparing them for the realities of trying to heal others within this structure of consumerism.
Right. And it feels like the onus is also on us to have to fit into this mold that's already there because it's just a structure that isn't going to go away at any time it feels like that it's not going away.
Yeah, I feel like the pandemic certainly changed things, especially in terms of practitioners considering private practice and doing it on their own.
Yeah.
When I think about, yeah, when I think about those who I've supported in this career, a lot of the um, barriers to private practice has been the business side of it. There's a lot of fear
Mhm.
on taking on liability and starting up a practice. And I've seen folks just stay at really, um, like, can we say harmful? Some
Yep.
very
Harmful,
harmful,
abusive, toxic. Yeah.
oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's not even our clients. Like, it is this this structure, this apparatus that we're in that really is about quantity over quality and
Mhm.
metrics over like emotions and experiences. And that's certainly problematic.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think that the pandemic if anything, these have been long-standing issues, before I even became a therapist, and the pandemic honestly just accelerated the move of therapists moving into private practice. And I get that there are a lot out there that they want to take the move, but they're scared, and rightfully so, because our programs, I know even in my program myself, they don't teach you the basics of how do you open up your own private practice, or even really, I mean, I would even say like my program didn't even talk about like what are the nuances of working in community mental health, group practice, private practice, and what does that really look like? And what do you need for those things? And I really wish
Yes.
that was knowledge. Like, I do wish that was knowledge passed down now that I know what I know now. So,
My first mentor out of the University of Alaska Anchorage was a full tenured professor. He was at the tail end of his career. I think he had literally a year to go. And he was very jaded around this one aspect. And I was so grateful to have been exposed to it, even though it was rough to hear, and was very uncomfortable. But he was a practicing psychiatrist, so he went through pre-med, med school, and then on top of that, did his psychopharmacology and his therapy training. And when he started his practice, he spoke about this like feeling taken advantage of by clients
wow.
when it came to billing and trying to like collect payment. And he would equate the work that he was doing with um, this mark of okay, you did a good job. And he kept saying, I wish they would have given me a business course. I wish
Mm,
part
yeah.
of the part of my education was this is how you open a business. These are kind of the laws around how you can collect, how you should set up a payment.
Yes.
Um, what does sliding scales look like? How do you work with insurance companies? Because he said he felt woefully unprepared. And
Yeah.
that feeling of being taken advantage of, even though people weren't doing it directly to him, right? Like we weren't doing it intentionally, but this system set him up to become jaded,
Mm-hmm.
and that can't be good for our clients, right? When we're dealing with these other forces that really are coming into the therapy room that should be outside.
Yep. And then it's just more blocks for other people wanting to start the private practice, but then they don't know how. Like, I would even argue, how do you even write your own intake paperwork? A lot of people don't know how to do that. I know it's something
Yes.
I struggled with. I was ready to pay almost $500 for a package of somebody's intake pay, and I decided against that, and I found help along the way. But that's just one small nuance of it all.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have this first mentor out of Alaska, and it it did a lot. Supported me in a lot of preparation, so I kind of knew what to look for, but I still didn't know what to do. I knew there was something to do, um, and then I met my second mentor out of Colorado State, the Colorado School for Family Therapy, and he was big into legal literacy. He worked through not just private practice, but setting up his own occupational school,
Mm-hmm.
training um, marriage and family therapists, and advocating for us at the legislative um, layer. And what he brought that I really like really resonated with me, but was actually quite fearful, is how the legal system works, how the boards are set up,
Yeah.
and really situated therapists, especially licensed practitioners, um, in this larger system. And I never got that at any other university or school, or even as I was apprenticing under marriage and family therapists and addictions counselors.
Yeah.
That the independent contractor, um, as they are um, as they are licensed by the board. The board is there to protect the clients, to protect the consumer. And really, it is this capitalistic model of consumer protection. So they're defining your scope of practice and what you can and cannot do within the state, and ensuring that the like the public has the ability to grieve, or to object to what it is that you're doing if they believe it's harmful. So that for me really changed the perspective. I personally, as well as a lot of early career clinicians that I trained, were under the impression that the board was kind of our support,
Right. Me too.
right?
I did too for a very
Yeah.
long time.
Thought it was our support, and that they were there for us to ask questions, for them to support us in what we should and shouldn't do. But it's not that. And that, I think that kind of structure translates to corporate entities as well.
Yeah.
The corporate entities in, but they have a single aim. And I know folks don't want to talk about it, but they are there to generate profit. And even the nonprofit organizations are there to sustain, right? They want longevity, that they want to continue. So even though they're not trying to generate profit, they still have a bottom line that they have to meet or they'll go out of business. And those priorities situates the practitioner against the the practitioner's like well-being is posed against the corporate's like goals, right? Their agenda to survive and to generate profit. And that's problematic because the organization that you're working for does not have your best interests at heart. Um, and it's one of these truths that we can be blind to.
It almost
Um,
feels like a catch 22 where when you're opening up your private practice, you're supposed to know everything, but then you're not given the tools or the education on how to do that, in your training and all the things. And then if you don't have the knowledge and you screw up or you miss something or make a mistake, then you're really screwed and you might get in trouble by the board, you might get in trouble ethics wise or client wise, whatever it is. And it just is that it almost feels like a form of gaslighting in a way. I don't know if I could use that word, but
yeah, it certainly is being tossed into the labyrinth,
yeah.
and you're just kind of meandering, hoping that you get to the right place. Um, and I think that's like we're doing a disservice to people who really are there to support their
Mm-hmm.
communities, to help during trying times, and our country has trying times. We have historically, but especially now. And yeah, I think we're not really helping, or we aren't helping ourselves or being helped in this regard.
And I have some
The,
like oh sorry. I have some thoughts on like how okay, so the system is the way it is and we can't change that. But how can we add to the system to help this and change this? And two thoughts I have is one,
Mhm.
I wonder if somehow, you know, the unfortunate part is sometimes with universities, you have to have a doctorate to be able to teach. And if there was a possibility for master level licensed clinicians to come in, have a syllabus on this is how you create your private practice, and it could be worth what, like a credit or whatever. I think that would really help so many people and have it in their system. The other thought is if there was somehow like an extension from the board or the counseling, the American Counseling Association or whoever it is, and have hired licensed master level clinicians or doctorate level clinicians and have them uh, be there to support you through work. Okay, is my work toxic? Is it abusive? How do I get through this? How do I find another job? How do I dust off my resume? How do I start my own private practice? Almost like maybe a coach or something. I think that would be really beneficial to other clinicians.
I would agree. And I've seen, see, it's interesting because I think the addiction professional organizations have this component.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So NADAC, which is the addictions um, organization, professional organization, they have the MAC, the Master Addiction Counselor um, credential. And what it positions the practitioner to do is program evaluation.
Hmm.
So it turns an eye to the organization that you work under in order to ensure that the the system is operating within the not just the scope, but not just a scope of practice, but like how do we support clients? How do we advocate for clients? How do we protect their data, right? Their health data.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have not seen a, a specific credential or program in any of the other professional organizations that does that. I'm not saying they don't. I just don't see it formally.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, or like in our
yeah,
face, that's accessible. Because the only thing that I have seen in my own research and time is when you are part of the American Counseling Association, they do have like they can look at your resume, you can ask like ethics questions and things like that. But that's really about it. That's as far as that goes. But for me to say, oh yeah, there's this one section in this organization or whatever, and they'll help you with this, and this, I can't say that I know of something like that.
Colorado is the or has taken the lead on many dimensions when it comes to mental health practice. And there's literally a attorney who had worked for the state for 30 plus years, um, who'd been their general counsel, who wrote the book. And I don't say that figuratively, I say that literally. He wrote a book that is how to practice um, mental health counseling within the state of Colorado and really connects and orients the practitioner to the legal aspect. Because what I have met a lot of students and early career clinicians who get a lot of ethics training. And sure, you go through some case studies, some vignettes in which you're trying to um, kind of balance, right? What the what ethics are involved and how to do appropriate care. But there rarely is anything that says, okay, well, how does ethics interact with the law, right? And how do you not do something that's criminal? Or how do you, within the system, prioritize your client's well being in spite of the law?
Yeah.
So you don't get much orientation. But like I said, Colorado is literally has a handbook that says, okay, um, these are like actual cases in which you're going to have to balance these two and then make a determination. Or this is how something went wrong and how you should have avoided this situation. Um, and not all states have that.
Do you know what it's called for Colorado?
Yes, it is. It's by Dennis Lane and Dennis with one N, and it is how to practice. Um, I think it's how to practice mental health care in Colorado. So
Cool.
something to that effect. Um, And it really connects the reader to the Mental Health Practice Act.
Hmm.
And this is another point that is not taught within graduate programs is this state specific um, licensure. I remember when I was in the University of Alaska, Anchorage, I had the pleasure of meeting a graduate teaching associate, and she was working towards her licensed psychology. So she was going to be a psychologist. And I remember hearing from her this shock as she's a full year into her grad program and she finds out that the state, like each state, has different educational requirements in order to
Yeah.
become licensed.
Yep.
And she had planned, didn't make it known, but she had planned to move to the East Coast, and that's where she was going to live out her life and do her practice. And she'd come to Alaska because of the affordability of the program.
Oh, okay.
And then she's yes, and then she's sitting there with this conundrum, this like, wait, um, my program that I'm paying this money for is not going to prepare me to meet state requirements in another state, and I might have to take additional courses, or it's going to extend out my program. I don't know what to do. And not every graduate has that experience where they find out anytime during their program that that's how it works,
Right. It's not just
right?
blatantly said, like, hey, if you ever decide to move
Yeah.
states, you have to go looking for that knowledge most of the time. I would argue. I mean, I can say for my own program that that was the case. And um, for me now, I'm looking into getting licensed into another state. I'm Minnesota based, and I know that this isn't me gloating or anything, but I know that Minnesota has a very high standard of 4,000 hours for licensure, and that translates to a lot of states because they usually require 3,000. But that doesn't mean that you're going to get all the requirements with your education, with your test, with your supervision, whatever. And sometimes they even say, okay, well, you have to be licensed in your home state for 2 to 5 years. It's
Yes.
really hard. And I've heard through the grapevine, just talking with other clinicians, that, I'm Minnesota based, but if I wanted to get licensed in, say, like Wisconsin, you have to, from what I've heard, you have to have education from one of their universities. Or like New York, it's a whole other qualification system. Or California, they also have a really hard process too to get licensed there, and it feels like it makes it impossible.
The it's not until you get into the field and you decide to move, right? Or you come across circumstances where you are forced to move
Yep.
and you come across this, but you get a better picture that the US is a patchwork of agencies, patchwork of requirements. And for the most part, they appear to be the same, but they are very, very different, especially when we talk about things like the difference between 2,000 hours, 3,000 hours, and 4,000 hours. 1,000 hour difference is a big deal. And I've seen, well, I personally, in coming from Alaska into Colorado, the board actually wanted me to do another internship. And at that point, I was 6 years, six
Wow.
years as a clinical supervisor. And they
Hmm.
stated that um, I need to do an internship and get another, I think they wanted 800 hours
As a supervisor
in addition.
yourself already.
Right, right. And I mean, fair, each state is different in how they support the community
Hmm.
and what their goals are. For instance, Massachusetts requires that every single applicant who applies take a DV, domestic violence
Oh.
course that is
Hmm.
state endorsed. And certainly if the state has identified a need in the community, I think that's great. But these things can be barriers um, that that we're just unaware of. And I think it makes these professional organizations that work at the national level, it makes it very difficult for them to kind of communicate that to their to their members, right?
Yeah, it's just a tough process all around. I mean, and then if we really want to get into the nit and gritty too, think about okay, once you get licensed in other states, you have to have the CEUs and then every year you have to do your renewals, which costs different, to each state to
Oh, yeah.
state. For me to apply for licensure in Minnesota, it was about 400 some dollars. To apply in a different state, it could be 200, it could be 150, and so like,
Alaska's 1,000.
oh, really? I did not know that.
Yes.
Tell me more.
Oh, the Alaska's interesting in that for the entire state, gun violence is high,
Mm,
suicide is high, and there's rampant substance use that really um, makes that dire, right? And the the state in trying to meet that demand separated mental health and addictions counseling as such, where addictions counseling, the education requirement is lower.
mm,
You still have to have substantial direct contact with clients, during your training. But you can go in with a GED or a high school diploma and start that
wow.
process. And the fees are rather low, so that um, like practitioners from different socioeconomic statuses can enter into the field. But the counterbalance to that is for mental health practitioners to get licensed. That the requirements are higher and the dollar amount is higher. Um, I think it's the difference between $200 and 1,000.
Hmm. So anybody in Alaska who wants to get licensed as like I don't know what the license is out there, but say licensed mental health counselor or whatever it is, it's $1,000 just to apply.
For the LPC, it's cheaper, but for LMFTs, it's $1,000,
Wow.
like right to the bar. Um, and that is not even to that doesn't even speak to some of the other logistical issues that it takes um, to get licensed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a
Absolutely.
lot of states that have since moved to electronic fingerprinting, but there are still states, and it's more than a handful that requires you to be in person and get inked, and you've got to be physically there in the state in order to put your
Right.
finger on a piece of paper. Yeah,
Wow.
um, and again, the the practical application of that signals that it is about consumer protection, right? Like the background checks that we do to
Mm-hmm.
get fingerprinted so that we're in the system, like we are in the uh, law enforcement system, so that if something does happen, that the state can enforce the regulation. And we just don't have enough education about the laws of particular states. And this brings me back to what I had forgot, which was the compacts. So at, I'm sure you're aware of the latest moves legislatively in order to enhance portability of licensure.
Yeah, the counseling compact. But this one
Yes.
is we're talking specific because I know there might be like a social work or LMFT ones that would be different. This is
Mhm.
specifically for LPCC, LPC, whatever your state is. So,
Yes. And the social worker professional organization and marriage and family therapy are trying to follow suit,
yeah.
and they are making some progress. But for LPCs, the like there's a move for each state to set up a registry so that you can register within the state instead of becoming fully licensed, and it establishes an interstate connection back to your home licensed state,
Hmm.
and it fast tracks the licensure process, but you're not picking up an additional license in this regard, because if any complaints come in, you will like they will be directed to your home board, but you can still be taxed and monitored within the state that you practice. And the concern that I have is one of jurisprudence, as we were saying before about this patchwork of laws. Um, each state is different, and as you know, when you apply for a different state license, they make you take a jurisprudence exam,
Yeah.
and that's just not something that we go through and just try to click and pass. The idea is that the state is orienting the practitioner to the specific laws within that state so that we are supporting our clients lawfully. And when when it's obvious that's different across states, right? So even seasoned practitioners, as they work across different states, might apply a different state's laws to the state that they're operating in or forget, and you run across a legal issue that you weren't really cognizant of.
Yeah.
And that's of course problematic for us. And that brings me to this point of liability. And we aren't prepared for that either. And what it means to be an independent practitioner and have to assume liability and positioning that within a corporate entity and how that works.
It's almost like I wish too, along with this counseling compact, because I've thought about liability myself and all the things. If somehow there could be a section on their webpage that they develop, and here, okay, here's Minnesota's laws, here's Colorado's, here's Florida, whatever. And that way you have that reference point or a handbook or whatever.
Yes. I think it would be helpful at the national level
Mm-hmm.
with the ACA and the other organizations to do just what you're saying. Maybe we pay some dues and we can jump on and see each state's laws, right? The Mental Health Practice
Yeah,
Act, or
yeah.
even a place to redirect us to um, the right state department that does that.
That would
Yeah,
be
that would be
that would
helpful.
be very helpful.
Or
Um,
test or anything, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then, because I know like so for example, like, and more specifically, like reporting is different in every single state. Like the client at 16 or 18 or adult protections can sometimes be different. Domestic violence reporting can sometimes be different. Um, I mean, there's other things, but those are the top of the things that come to my mind when I'm like, liability in different states. What does that look like?
I've consulted on more than a dozen legal cases that came before the board when it comes to suicide and our clients.
Okay.
I've conducted over 15,000 full suicide assessments. I was the inaugural program manager for the now 988 service in Colorado. And there are events, again, that we're not prepared for, in which we are liable for the safety of our high risk clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember working the crisis lines and meeting this amazing um, person with lived experience, right? Someone who experiences schizophrenia, has auditory and visual hallucinations, and them lending their lived experience to our program. and really giving us insight into all the stuff that happens outside of the session, right? Which we often don't have, we're not privy to, or we're just hearing reports. And what they keyed me into is is that the universities across the country here in the States rarely, if ever, have a course within a graduate program on suicide and how
Okay.
to and suicidality and how to support high risk clients, even non-suicidal self-injury or self-harm. And there's a handful of states that maybe every other year will have a single course that has has anything to do with trying to support our high risk clients.
Hmm.
And it's it's intentionally created a blind spot in which most most caregivers will not even want to ask the question, have you experienced suicidal ideation, right? Or suicidal behavior?
Yeah.
We don't even ask the question because we're not trained to. And when we do hear it, it's scary, right? Especially if you're not prepared.
And you have to be very
It's
blunt.
yes, and the and it's interesting too because the research shows that being blunt, direct, and asking the question confidently inspires confidence in your clients to share, and that even speaking about your suicidal ideation in front of someone who is not going to judge you and is primed to support you in itself is healing. To say it or to testify or be witnessed in talking about these things because suicide, especially suicidal ideation, it exists in our head and it can become very skewed when you don't hear it aloud or someone else say, whoa, is that what you meant to say? Right? Is that how you really feel?
Yeah. I will
And
say, from
what?
my experience, my program did have a class, but it was crisis intervention. And it was mainly like, what do you do in this situation or this situation? But I would say it was very basic. It was not in depth. And my, and I'll be honest, like my practicum and my internship was working at a place that had 24/7 crisis intervention. And so part of my job in that experience was going to the hospital, doing assessments, having assessments in the office. And I would also be the one, and this was an outpatient clinic. I was actually the one who would transport clients to the behavioral health unit in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or I would go to their house and do the assessment too. But I would say that that experience that I had is very rare. Um, I can say that the people that I went to grad school with was not having that similar experience. And so um, I just think it really depends on every single person too. But I will say from my own experience, I've heard a lot of clients say that they are so scared to talk about it because they're worried, oh, that means I'm going to go to the hospital. Oh, that means that I'm going to have to be in inpatient treatment. Where, with my clients, I always tell them, I'm like, look, this is the plan. If you have it, let's talk about it. Let's assess, make sure you're safe. But it doesn't instantly mean that you're going to go to the hospital. And I think just me being blunt and me being, because I've done it for so long, me being confident and just having that statement, they're like, okay, I can tell Jenny about this. These thoughts are coming back, if that makes sense.
Oh, it totally makes sense, especially in terms of having options when you aren't trained, when you don't know what options there are. Yes, your mind goes immediately to hospitalization, inpatient, involuntary, right? And being able to assess the risk and the severity level and feel confident and in the like placement and support for our clients is essential. And we go back to the idea of consent for treatment and being able to inform our clients about what our limitations are, what to expect, what we're trying to do, how we're trying to support. And when you aren't trained to support high risk clients and know where the emergency services are, what meets that threshold, right? We can't even inform our clients about that so that they can make an informed decision to disclose their experience.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It should be just plain and simple in the informed consent at that point.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised how common it is to have suicidal ideation.
Absolutely.
E-
Yeah, it's not just this mysterious thing that happens in the dark.
Yeah, or that you have to be like so down in the pits,
Yeah,
right? That
right?
the thought emerges.
Right. It can happen if, say, you're stranded on the side of the road because your car blew a tire and you're like, when you have just those quick moments, it doesn't mean that it's this, you're in a rut completely and this has been going on for months or weeks. Like, it is more common than we know and that we talk about.
Yes, yes. Especially when you consider that 52% of the population are female and female bodied people with female hormone profiles.
Mm,
When you are postpartum, it is very common, and we don't talk about that.
right. Or even PMDD, I think about,
Yes.
or yeah, during menstrual cycles, that can
Hmm.
definitely come up.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we need better women's care too. I just want to throw that out there.
And I think like with experience, now being licensed and having so much, yeah, like just having so much experience now compared to when I was in grad school, I know so much more now, and I fully understand how many flaws there are in the system. Just like we've been talking about this whole time, there is so many, and then the question is, what can we do about it? And I truly do think that the first step is talking about it because we don't talk about it enough. And I think that unfortunately some clinicians may feel scared to talk about it.
Especially when it's attached to your livelihood,
Mm,
right? Like, I think that there's a lot of the public that believe that therapists are in line with medical professionals when it comes to pay, and that, oh, you can you can subsume this liability. I'm paying you $300 an hour, right? Or I'm paying you 200,000 an hour, and not realizing that half of that goes to the state, and then what, 20% of that goes to operations, and then you're left with a fraction
hmm.
of the fee for service, right?
Yeah, I
So
remember
they
when I
go ahead.
was a clinical trainee, I would have blue, I live in very rural Minnesota, so most of my clients are very blue collar, and they would make comments and say, "Yeah, that's why they pay you the big bucks," or "That's why you get paid so much money." In reality, behind closed doors, I would never say this, but to them, but they were making more money than me. And I'm not saying that they
Mhm.
don't deserve that. That is so not what I'm saying. That's not the point. The point is that you would think that with a master's degree, all this training, all the licensure stuff that it takes, that you would be getting paid that much or more.
No, but the system is set up as such that you are indebted to the training that you're required in order to pursue the career, and then and you go into these organizations in which you aren't paid a living wage, and you're afraid, right?
Mm,
Because there's such an implication to your livelihood, to you being able to um, pay your rent and eat for that week if you speak out against injustice, or even just like a policy issue. And I have worked with how many organizations in doing program evaluation,
hmm.
and it not being apparent that there are some internal policies that clash with the legal standard. And as practitioners lean on their organizations for support in how they support their clients, the organization will say, oh, well, policy says you can do that,
Yep.
when it is actually illegal. Like there's a law that says you cannot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is no check and balance in that. There's um, certainly for 3.2, 3.5, and higher on the continuum of care, those organizations have these regular reaccreditations in which the state is either evaluating policies and procedures and auditing, or there's a voluntary accreditation in order to ensure alignment between internal policy and the law. But that isn't that standard isn't placed on corporate entities.
Hmm. And the crazy
And
part of it all
oh,
is
tell me.
that in our ethics, well, maybe it's state dependent, but I know here in our ethics, it is, whether you're LMFT or LPCC, you have to bring that to your organization, which honestly, in abusive, toxic organizations that are already having these policies, they're going to look at you as the problem, and it could open
Hmm.
up to liability for you and you getting in trouble. And then if they don't accept you bringing the problem to the organization saying, hey, like this is, illegal for us to do, this is against our ethics, and they don't change that, you're supposed to quit and quit your livelihood, quit your job, go find somewhere else to work. And on top of it all, the biggest catch 22, I feel like, in all of that too, is that once you get fired from an organization, let's say you bring it up, you say, hey, this is against my ethics, this is not legal for us as licensed clinicians, and you get fired or you get written up, now you're going to have to report that to your licensing board every time you renew your license, depending. But you certainly are going to have to report that to getting credentialed with insurance companies.
Yeah, so it follows you trying to make a good decision in supporting all the stakeholders, right? You get scapegoated. And that brings me to again this positioning that we don't understand, in which the like when there is something that is illegal or unethical that occurs, the remedy by the organization is to release you, to terminate,
Yep.
like the independent, or like the fully independent licensed therapist, and they will. And well, I mean, I'm sure everyone is aware of how HR is positioned to support the interests of the organization, but the same thing with liability insurance. You should never solely depend on the liability insurance of your employer,
Yes.
because they are actually going to instruct the termination if the HR doesn't already, and you're not going to get defended. So you need to have professional liability insurance. I have an article, a peer review article in the Journal of Systemic Therapies, that's a composite case study
Hmm.
that actually walks through these scenarios in which corporatized mental health care is at odds with what we know our legal and ethical requirements are, and how to operate within our scope. And that article takes you through the scenarios with pragmatic resolutions, and it even has excerpts of things that you can say in order to speak out against some of these injustices, right, knowingly or otherwise.
I
And I
love
think
that.
we need more of that.
Yeah. Where can people find that, or what is it called?
Sure, it is mentorship and clinical supervision through Haley's strategic model, a composite case study in legal literacy, and it is in the Journal of Systemic Therapies. And it came out in this year, 2025.
Oh, recent. Okay.
Oh yes, and it also addresses the distinction between coaching and counseling, because that is an issue that has arisen
Yep.
since the pandemic,
Yep. Absolutely.
where unlicensed professionals are using are using techniques and modalities that is um, it is restricted to these protected and regulated professions. The thing that I'm concerned the most about that is really this misrepresentation and misinformation in terms of what service is being provided.
Mm.
Our profession takes special care in informing our clients about the potential risks of receiving these types of supports
Right.
because right like the healing process in itself isn't a clear cut like positive uh there are like it's a hard road to tread through, and it's one of the reasons why we go through this rigorous training, these special programs, continuing education, getting licensed, right? So in part, it is, or like the public is at a disadvantage in not knowing the difference between the two. And I actually have an article out in the Family Therapy magazine, July, August of 2024,
Hmm.
that that helps clients orient to what is psychotherapy, regulated, and the unregulated coaching landscape. The that one is freely available on the Family Therapy Magazine website. I believe it's FTM. And I also have an article that doesn't have a paywall on psychotherapy.net
Oh, okay.
that also orients clients to the distinction between the two. And really, support or getting support is important, and I would advise anyone to reach out for help. But being informed about the type of support you're going to receive, especially if it's a paid service, right? I think is important.
Think my gripe is that it feels like a grift a lot of the time. That people they read a counseling book or a therapy book and they're like, see, I got it. And they have no education or background in what we do. And then they advertise themselves as a coach. Like, for example, they'll read a Sue Johnson book on attachment and they'll say, okay, now I'm an attachment coach, or they'll read attachment stuff that they find online and won't even look at Sue Johnson or that kind of research and say, yep, I'm an attachment coach. That is really frustrating.
I can see how that's frustrating. But what it reminds me of is these two cyclical events that happened. Gosh, I think the late 80s, early 90s, there was a self-help movement where a lot
Oh,
of authors started writing books,
yep.
and you would go through the books, and there was some professional like pushback against like not guiding someone in person through it.
Hmm.
And certainly there's benefit, or there can be benefit to someone going through a self help book. But with that type of media, it's thought out, it's thorough. There's a publisher, there you have an editor, right? There's often this team dynamic that's supporting that book. But now, right, without that apparatus to support and how quickly people can self-publish,
Hmm.
we've got folks who are not experts, who are using lay or pop psychology in order to lend support. And again, I think it's about this misrepresentation. Sure, you might have something there, but are you supporting someone from stem to stern? Are you taking a client from the intake process um, all the way out to termination? Is there a defined treatment plan in which you're hitting goals and objectives, right? That you're monitoring and checking progress, right? Like all these elements that are evidence based and you are especially trained in order to do is absent. And And it's kind of scary, right?
Yeah. I think part of me too is it's my own stuff of like, you didn't have to go through all this work and I had to get licensed and all the things, and you're charging 150 an hour, which is typical for in my area, 150 for a private practice. And it feels a little bit like, hey, you're kind of stepping on my turf and you didn't do the work or have that kind of research backing.
It's fair. I think it's a fair critique. The the charging that much too. I think about myself and my colleagues and how bad we feel about charging for
Yeah.
our service, especially at the level that is, I mean, I wouldn't say there's an industry standard, but there definitely is um, a bar and a compared to a cost of living. And we already have difficulty, right? Like setting that bar appropriately, and then to
Mhm.
have someone come in um, and purport to do something that we do, right? Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And I wonder then, I'm like, ooh, is it my own stuff that I'm having this big of a judgment or reaction, or is it something else? And I think I can let a lot of this stuff go. And I think where I draw the line for my own personal, like, this makes me uncomfortable, is the fact that I've seen people without a master's degree or a license in therapy, and they say, oh, I'm a sex therapist. And um, you know me, I went to the University of Wisconsin Stout and got my certificate in sex therapy. And I have my, therapy license. And so I do identify myself as a sex therapist. And so I think that's frustrating for me. And it feels like I'm like, how is that legal that you're advertising yourself as a sex therapist when you don't have that education or license? And you're really a sex coach. And again, you still don't have that regulated field of education, right? Because coaching isn't really regulated right now.
And that question that you ask, how is this legal? There's a definitive answer to that. And it is illegal.
Yeah.
The regulated professions within the mental health practice laws of each and every state specifically reserves and protects those words. You cannot call yourself a therapist, a psychotherapist, a counselor, a
Mm-hmm.
psychologist. It is codified in the law. And it's it really is an issue of enforcement, right? The the state regulatory boards don't have eyes in which they can see every single illegal act. It's not until it's reported by someone that says, "Hey, please investigate this. I think there's a law that's being broken here." And I'm not saying, as a matter of fact, we should all just go out and start discovering these things and putting eyes on it and sending in grievances. But if we do feel as such, there is a method, right? Like we have a specific procedure that we are to do. And I would also argue that within our code of ethics, we might be required to report someone who is
Right.
right doing an illegal act.
Right. Right. And I think that can get hard sometimes because then I'll see like these coaches that are I'll look at their websites and I'll see like words that I'm like, I don't think you should be using those words, like therapy, treatment plans. Like you cannot say that you're going to make a treatment plan with a client without having those protected titles. I'm pretty sure that's illegal by saying you're going to
Yep.
create treatment goals. And then they'll hide their state that they're in, their full name, or things like that. They'll give as much vague information, but still provide those services um, to kind of mitigate their own liability, I think.
I would assume that for some proportion of the coaching field, it really is about not knowing, right? Like there might be individuals that have all the best intentions,
Right,
but
right.
they aren't right. They are not aware of the laws. They have not gone through grad programs, right? In order to know what is malfeasance and benevolence. And they just think they can operate the serve or provide the service, right?
Right.
So I think making that distinction is helpful, but still for our clients, there's real harm that can be done.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, and I'm not anti life coach or coaching, or I've seen therapists who say, "Hey, I'm going to be a coach instead of great." My issue that I take with is people who are doing it to grift and to say, "Oh, there's
Mm,
money in this. I'm going to use this and advertise this way." And it's the bad actors that I really have a problem with,
yeah.
to be honest.
And I'll jump in on that too. I'm not saying coaching is this horrible evil, and I've seen executive coaching,
Yeah.
job coaching, um, like um, like domestic tasks, like how to keep your space clean and orderly. Um, that's really, really helpful for people. But we are not or those are not supporting someone in making decisions about their mental health, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember which actor it was. I want to say it was Kiki Palmer, but I'd have to look it up. But it was one actor who had hired a coach, and they thought they were the therapist all along. And all along, they
Oh
were just a
no.
coach. And it did a number on their mental health. And so that's just, again, where it just comes in so important of like knowing what the difference is and what each role
Hmm.
means.
Hmm. Yep.
The other thing I wanted to tell you, I don't know if you know about this, but lately on TikTok, I've been seeing on TikTok lives, people saying I'm doing unlicensed therapy on TikTok live. And it's just like a normal, just a regular person who might be
Just
going to,
casually saying that?
who's like going to like business school, or they work at, which is fine, but it's the fact that they're going on TikTok live and they're saying, "Hey, I'm providing unlicensed therapy." And I have in the past, I've gone into live and saying, "Hey, you can't say you're providing unlicensed therapy because that's a real thing. That's a clinical
Hmm.
trainee. That's an associate therapist. That's, a therapist in training that's supervised. Like, that's an actual protected title as well. I would think. And
Oh
then
yes.
they'll just give, random advice to people who are talking in the live or asking. And it's just so frustrating for me. And then I ask the question, all of these problems that we've talked about, and then I ask the question of like, how did we get here? And I love that you brought up the 90s, early 2000s self-help. I love that you brought that up because I didn't even think of that, and it just makes me really think about how like this has been a problem that's been festering for so long, that
Hmm.
we have this unregulated field, and that yes, there are some great actors and who mean well and are doing great work, and then we have the people who are just plain grifters and are bad actors. And now we're
And
seeing insurance companies like Optum hiring these coaches where you don't need the education. um, some of them, you don't even need a bachelor's degree.
I was just reminded of paraprofessionals. So there is an entire field of support staff that, and para is Latin for um, along with, so, or alongside. So we're talking about professionals who have the direction of someone who is licensed, and they are, getting in there and doing the things that we don't have enough hands to do. So it provides a really helpful service, but they still are working under someone who's licensed and providing um, like evidence-based support.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that coaching doesn't follow suit if they because there's literally a model out there.
Are you talking also about, I don't know what you have in Alaska or what there is in Colorado, but in Minnesota we have ARMS, Adult Rehabilitative Mental Health Services. Um, do you know much about that,
No,
or
I
do you
don't. Tell me
guys
about
have?
it.
So, when you work in community mental health, you can refer clients to have that. Usually, they have to be on state insurance for the state to cover it. And what happens is once you refer it, a client can have someone, an arms worker, which is really a skills worker, is also what it's called, come into your house, meet you in the community or meet you in the office. And what they help you with is kind of pairing what your therapist is working on. So let's say it's social anxiety. So they're going to come meet you in the community and they're going to take you to the store and they're going to help you interact with, say, like a worker at the store and coach you through it and give you and like pair the skills and teach you skills on how to manage your anxiety through that. And that's just one example. It could be also organization. Like I've had clients who have are hoarders, or social anxiety again is one, and just things like that, or depression, getting that motivation, getting outside, getting into the community. Um, and so, really teaching you the basic skills on how to live your everyday day life, and the verbiage is to return to a baseline level of functioning. It's a great program. I know certain states have it. I guess some states didn't have that. I actually didn't know that, but um, I think more of that also needs to play a huge part in this. That would help clients.
I am glad you brought that up because there's like other models that do the exact same thing, where there's this delineation between mental health support and maybe behavioral or skills building or something that's more narrow and refined. When we talk about milieu treatment, there often is milieu staff, people who are unlicensed, who are working under a directing clinician and a program manager, in which it is being divided. What is the skills based training? What is the life skills training that can happen, the relational training that can happen in real time as you model things, right? As you peel back the curtain when there's interactions between residents and trying to navigate those relationships. There is these ancillary models. The same thing with AA and NA, right? Like that is not treatment, um, but it's um, this ancillary service that, in tandem with psychotherapy, with counseling, a person can get that kind of support. There's even ADHD coaches in which there's this co-support where there's a directing clinician and counselor who's working on the mental health aspect, like self-esteem, right? Um, uh, yes. So we'll say that self-esteem as an example, and then you might have a coach that you're meeting with in order to do time management and the more pragmatic, applicable, um, like applicable training, right? Um, so there are models out there, but coaching is floating there out on their own island, and I would hate to get stranded unknowingly on the island.
Right, right. Because I think from all of these services that you are listing off, it sounds like no matter what, you're still going to be supervised by someone who's licensed, or
Mhm.
the a lead license who's going to sign off on that paperwork and supervise that. I know it is for arms, because the therapist has to be involved and the supervisor has to be involved to sign off on that.
Yeah, I
And
worked
usually
in
with arms too, or the therapist is making that goals of like, hey, I
yes,
want you as the skills worker, I want you to work on organization skills, I want you to work on like getting back in the community, motivation, regulating emotions. And their work, it's like double the work, and I that's why I love these kinds of services, like just like the ones that you listed, because it just further helps and assists the client to get to beyond just the 1 hour that we might see them the week, or 2 hours
yes,
or whatever. For example, like arms,
yes.
you can see arms multiple times a week for multiple hours. It's not just 2 or 4 hours. It could be six, um, which is really nice.
ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis, has a similar model where there's technicians, but there's also a coach, right? And there's a coach, and then there's a therapist, and then there's a coach, and then there's a therapist, and then there's a coach, and then there's a therapist, 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 and who are certified instead of licensed, who are part of treatment planning and they're doing the execution component while someone else is managing, or like licensed professional is managing the treatment and the
Right.
progress. And I've actually worked in settings where there's a coach in tandem with me. And as I build a treatment plan out, I'm excising pieces that are more life skills or skills based so that the coach can really just check in and help with accountability or help with the like general life stressors that certainly contribute to the mental health component, but it allows me to focus on the mental health component
Yeah. That sounds
instead
really
of,
nice.
yeah, right. There are some like models out there, or at least some programs that we could set up that would really benefit the profession as a whole. And I've got one for you. So
Okay.
I have an article that's coming out the fall of 2025 through psychotherapy.net. I have one that's how to avoid burnout and find joy in corporatized care
Mhm.
settings. But I have another one that explores this new like supervision model that I came up with, in which we divide clinical supervisors from administrative supervisors.
Oh, I
So,
wish.
right?
I
Our
wish.
audience, our audience may not know, but supervisors, clinical supervisors within our profession are stretched rather thin.
Mm,
And it's not just like, having a large team under you to support, but you're doing these two roles. So you have a dual relationship that is actually in conflict, in which
yeah.
you have an administrative function in which you are evaluating performance on different metrics, right? And have to support staff in meeting those metrics. But then there's this clinical supervision element where you're there to assist in growth and development in counseling skills and having to work through some really, really difficult, emotionally exhaustive work. And it does a disservice to both the supervisee and the supervisor to not have that divided, to not have those relationships divided.
Yeah.
So, in the article that I have coming out in psychotherapy.net, it positions the department really to divide these into two different people, and you have a didactic or what is it? A dyadic supervisory relationship in which you go to your admin supervisor for the admin stuff, and then you go to your clinical supervisor for the clinical stuff. And then also I've got or in there this model of peer support that does not connect to management, so that your colleagues on the clock can go into a room and talk about the experience, be vulnerable, and it not be held against you by the corporation.
That sounds amazing. And it's just that is something that every single corporation in mental health needs, to be honest.
Yeah, because I think it really supports the workforce, and we really need some support. We
Yeah.
really need some support.
And then you think about like, well, why are all these clinical trainees or clinical associates, whatever you want to call them, why are they all leaving the field before they get licensed? And I think this is a huge piece of it.
Not all supervisors who do this are intentionally bad actors. They're placed in a system that forces them,
Yeah.
right, to respond in a particular way. And again, the corporation is setting up this system of prioritizing profit over people. And it's interesting for me because when we talk about isomorphism, meaning that there are elements within a relationship that are reflected at different levels, we in our profession spend a lot of time and concern on the idea of the therapeutic relationship and the therapeutic alliance and how to protect that, right? And understanding how it can be harmful when that relationship is unhealthy. Yet, isomorphically, the clinical supervisory relationship, right? We don't preserve it as we do as or as we would with our clients. We don't attend to it in that way. And especially if you are an admin supervisor, right? And you have to pass on these corporate policies that are oftentimes in conflict with ethics, right? So I think the system is really setting this up and it should be changed. Another component of this system is that the liability really lies at the practitioner. So even though it is top down enforced, it is bottom up regulated. And
Yep.
that tension, especially as practitioners are unaware, they are disempowered to make any change, even though like the onus lies on them to initiate it and the consequences fall at their feet. So it's a really precarious position to be under, especially if you're not making a living wage.
Yeah. Yep. It's just a whole another factor in all of this, and how mental health has become corporatized, how some corporations have become abusive, and big factors on why clinical trainees are leaving the field before they're licensed.
Yes.
And this is just one example. We haven't even covered um, clinical trainees or therapist or licensed therapists having to sign non-compete contracts or NDAs, or um, I've had it where a client will be subpoenaed for court, and then the client has to pay the company so much money, like an egregious amount, $500 to $1,000, and then you as a clinician, you're not going to see any of that money, and the client can't use their insurance.
Hmm.
That is exploitation. And so
Agreed.
many of these clinicians, licensed or clinical trainee, unfortunately, I see it more as clinical trainees being exploited in these corporations. I'm not saying all corporations are bad and this is happening
Mhm.
everywhere, but it's unfortunate that it feels like it's happening at majority at these corporations.
I think this is why I'm a big advocate for small group practices, especially when you look, the like how nerve-wracking it is and demotivating it can be in order to start your own practice. But when you get a collective or a group together in which you can support each other, you have the like aligned goals, and each of you can take the reins in supporting yourself. That there really is this balance that's struck between supporting clients and supporting therapists.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's why clinicians are leaving in droves for private practice. I've said it before, and I'm like, how much do I believe this now? Unfortunately, I feel like community mental health is dying in the sense that they aren't getting enough clinicians hired or keeping them. And again, I'm not saying all community mental health centers, but I'm seeing a lot, and I'm seeing a lot of them closing.
I have too. And they're, the CMHCs are getting it from many angles.
Mm-hmm.
State funding is
Yep.
being pulled. Like you said, the like trying to retain a workforce is difficult. And community mental health has a place. It definitely has
Absolutely.
a place. Walk-in clinics have a place within the system. And there just isn't, it isn't prioritized, and I'm going to say late stage capitalism is to blame, right? Like
Right.
these very large entities that can advertise at scale that work hand in hand with insurance providers really are able to um, get their services out there. And yeah, the don't get me don't get me started on insurance companies and how that system
Yeah,
works.
that's a whole
Um,
other thing. But
it
but I
right.
think about like for a long time there has been this exploitation in community mental health. Again, not all, but majority of clinicians, for example, a quota. I don't call it client contact hours. I call it a quota because it is of say I've seen it 36 clients a week. I have seen that before. And that is burnout city. That is, in my opinion, that's a factory. Yeah, I have my own thoughts and beliefs about that. And now I feel like just now in the last 2 years, I have been seeing community mental health trying to change that narrative and lower the quota and make changes. And a part of me is like, I feel like it's too late. I feel like they are not catching up with the times and giving the needs of the clinicians. And now, even more than ever, especially the pandemic, like we said in the beginning of this, it has accelerated clinicians leaving in droves to private practice.
I think for your audience that doesn't quite have an eye on how this process works, you might think 36 hours, oh, that's less than 40. You
Right,
should be
right,
happy.
right.
Like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
But what isn't seen or experienced is that we are having like relational contact with someone that is both like cognitively and emotionally exhausting. And we aren't batteries that are inexhaustible, right? So having to sit and witness someone's pain, to support people through very complex situations, you have to join the system at that point. And we're doing a lot of work in order to be present and understand
Mm-hmm.
what people in pain and distress are going through, and to have that 6 hours a day straight while you have to switch gears from experience to experience of your client. It takes a toll.
And sometimes
And
seven to
then,
8 hours, sometimes seven
right,
to eight
right.
clients a day,
And that doesn't even
especially,
include documentation and having to relive
especially
it as you document.
yeah, especially if you have a 36 client quota. So, and then on top of it, like you said, you have to contact the case manager sometimes, the probation officer. Sometimes that's
Mhm.
contacting the arms worker, that's talking with your supervisor, having case consultation to talk about the case and what you can be doing better or services for the client. Yeah, that is a lot.
Yes, and it does a disservice to the client, but also I think for those who are not therapists, you don't really get to disconnect as cleanly as if you were doing janitorial work, right? Be
Right.
able to don a uniform, go in, do your job that does not look like your life, and then come back into your life. And when you are so emotionally and cognitively drained, and then you have to go back into your life and support your family, your spouse, like be present with your friends, play with your children, right? You're very exhausted emotionally.
Absolutely. Cuz and that is also including remembering every single person that comes into your office and is your on your case, their life story. I'm super into narrative therapy and knowing someone's story, and that alone too is very it can be very draining, not in a bad way, but in a I don't have a lot of energy way.
I like that you said not in a bad way, because I think this is a thing that we don't talk about as well.
Yeah, it's not.
Emotional labor is emotional labor, right? It doesn't make you a bad person to feel along with your client and to admit that you're affected in that way.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
what we're doing within the therapeutic setting is we are we are leveraging the relationship, the human connection, in order to provide healing. And that isn't something that you can just place on a factory belt and let the thing go down and people just touch it and package it and ship it off. It isn't something that you can just be mindless to and repetitive about. And that again is the this aim of corporate settings where they like that is their aim. And I don't think it's well, it should not be so radical to say
Yeah.
that
There
that there's different agendas.
Yeah, therapy farms are not client centered. They're not clinician centered either. To be honest with you, I didn't know to what extent that this was until I actually got into the field. And I really wish someone, before I got into the field, before I got into my master's program, I really wish somebody would have sat me down and said, "Hey, this is what you're going to be signing up for, and there's all this other stuff." And be really specific with it on like there's this issue and this issue. And I think that would have prepared me more for all of this. And I'm not regretting becoming a therapist or anything. I'm just saying I wish I would have been more prepared by specifically knowing these things. And it feels like it isn't until you're more seasoned that seasoned therapists know this stuff, and know that there's these issues within the field.
And that's why since 2018, I have been positioning myself to be a mentor
Yeah.
and to look at the licensure process as an apprenticeship
Mm-hmm.
so that I can provide insights to some of these truths about the industry that would otherwise blindside you and knock you down.
Yeah.
Because being prepared and knowing something, right, again gives you the ability to pivot, adjust, and or to resist. And I think that's important.
You know, I think another layer in all of this is because I am autistic, and I think that I really wish I would have known this stuff too before, especially as a clinical trainee, because then my sense of justice and my sense of like, no, this is wrong, I need to speak up about this, it got me in trouble. It got me in trouble at times. And I really wish I would have known so that I could say, you know what, this systemic issue, this is above me. And either I need to pivot, like you said, or learn ways to cope with this and have that kind of support. Because, and that's another thing too, is like there was such a lack of support in my training as a therapist that kind of, I would say like didn't drink the Kool-Aid, but also just really understood where I was coming from, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes sense. And you and me both. I have certainly said things about the system that has gotten me in big trouble.
Yeah.
And a big shout out to all the systemic psychotherapists out there, the marriage and family therapists, because our profession and our professional identity primes us to talk about systems and to be system thinkers. So, for practices that identify systemically, we can have those conversations and it not seem like it's coming out of left field. It still is the hard discussions to have, but for those who practice individual, where everything is internal, right? Like within the person,
Mm-hmm.
speaking out against these environmental or systemic issues is dangerous. It holds consequences for those who are in power or by those who are in power.
Absolutely. And I truly wish I would have. I wish I would have known that you know we're trained to speak up, speak out. It's in our ethics, but also know that even if you do it tactfully, you can have repercussions. And that doesn't mean that I would change the way I've spoken out and I'm going to speak out and say what I need to say, but it would have helped a lot in preparing myself. So, anything that you can share with your upcoming article about how therapists themselves or other professionals can navigate through stuff like this that they're going through in these corporations or in corporatized mental health?
Sure. I have a series of studies that are coming out and some editorial pieces in publications like Contemporary Family Therapy and um, what is it? The Critical Public Health, Psychiatry Times, and the a more recent one is the Journal of Evaluation of Clinical Practice. And the through line, the theme that I'm exploring is health data protection within text disruptors. So, as we all are aware, there are large corporate entities that are run by technologists, the people
Mm-hmm.
in the tech industry, in order to attempt to maximize service, um, to computerize or digitize or automate like services for people seeking these types of treatment, and there is they are training off of your demographics, like large pools of demographics, large pools of re- audio recordings of sessions, um, books and transcripts, and again, we're talking about, I mentioned earlier, this bottom up this bottom up enforcement
Mm-hmm.
that really isn't present because it requires us as practitioners in order to say something, right?
Yeah.
To say, wait, hold on, you're not protecting the clients at this. You are putting the clients in harm's way for profit. And again, I have some articles that really try to shine light on this because, in the same way that therapists are not prepared about the business portion, they aren't really prepared for the technology component. Um, Teletherapy is more prevalent now and has done some really good in providing access to services for those in rural settings, those in which transportation is problematic, for working professionals who can't make clinic hours. So it opens it up, but we're not aware if the system is secure, right? What happens if there's a data
Yeah.
breach? We aren't trained in that. That's not our scope. So a lot of my articles are bringing attention to some of the inherent consequences and given how these systems are built, and a and really a call for not just regulatory change, but for us as practitioners to work in tandem with tech, like these technology companies and startups, as consultants, so that we can apply ethics, apply regulation, right? Apply the law so we can protect our clients.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so needed. It's so needed. Your work, and I hope you know that how important and valuable your work is. I truly do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think um every person is going to be different on how we navigate this, and that is okay. For me, that meant me creating my space of my podcast and blog Highly Therapized because I needed to get these thoughts out and I needed a space where I can be validated and also help tell other people's stories and validate those experiences and that's why I'm so glad that you have reached out and that we are doing this today and have talked about this because I just remember in my own journey of becoming a therapist, I felt so alone and I didn't have anybody to validate what I was going through. You know, for so long I thought, oh, this is just me. What's wrong with me? And to come to find out, talking with other therapists and you, I'm not alone. And these experiences are prevalent and they're happening and not just one person, but actually even across the United States and maybe even across the globe.
Yeah, when we don't talk about issues and raise awareness, we certainly feel alone, but we're not going to come up with answers individually,
Yeah.
especially as we change systems. So, yes, what you're doing in raising awareness and permitting people to talk about this, those that are affected, you are doing a great service, and I thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, my goal really is to just talk about it, bring awareness and validate truly.
Well, it is needed.
Yeah. And you know, I know today we didn't talk much more about there is more than just what we talked about today of abuses that go on in corporatized mental health. This is really just, I would say, a beginner's course or you know, a beginner's discussion on what is going on right now in the field and how mental health has become that almost like a corporation rather than that
Yes.
care on client care and therapeutic care. Yeah.
Well, I certainly would enjoy coming back and
Yes.
dialing down around some of the solutions, because sure, raising awareness is great, but it should inform intervention, right? How do we do something about it?
Yes. And I think that would be a really great conversation to have. And maybe you can also share some more in depth into your own research and what you have written about in your own work. That would be awesome. I would really love to have you on again and talk even more about this and how can we protect ourselves and protect our clients in the process. That'd be great.
I'd be glad to, and I certainly appreciate you inviting me on and talking about this issue.
Yeah. So how can the audience find you, follow you, all of those things?
Sure. So I'm not big into X or Blue Sky. I kind of stay right in the professional realm. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Ezra Lockhart, EZRALOCKHART. You can literally Google Scholar me or Google me, and you'll find me. I also have a research ID on ORCID, ORCID, which is a researcher ID that you can see a central place of all my publications. But probably Google Scholar is going to be your best bet.
Okay.
I also have a private practice at easydoesitcounseling.com, and that's easy, EASY. And I provide services in 4 states right now in 2025. I've got Hawaii, Alaska, Colorado, and Louisiana. And it's a teletherapy practice. I do specialize in neurodiversity and queer issues. So I have a lot of clients who are seeking support around family reunification. So if you out there need a specialist, come on over to the website and I'm glad to support you.
Yeah, and I think that website too, a lot of people can find your work on too in the is it the about me section?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
There's also a Meet the Founder.
Yes, meet the founder.
Absolutely.
Yes, and where people can find more of your stuff as well. So, okay, well, do you have any other last thoughts or just any last things that you want to get out before we end today?
Sure. I just want to kind of give a general thank you to your audience and the listeners today. And I know right now we're in some trying times.
Mm,
Um, there's all kinds of issues that are happening globally, and I want to empower you to take care of yourself, to seek support within your community, and to really build that bottom up networks so that you can be empowered, you can influence positive change. You are not alone.
Absolutely. What a wonderful note to end on, validating everybody in this experience as we move through whatever is going to come to be here. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and we will see you next time.